Welcome back to the next video in the Arc Nova video tutorial series. This is Adam Horton, and this video we're going to be talking in depth about the first break of the game. In the first break of the game, your immediate goals should be mostly about making more money. There are a few different ways that you can do that. You can play sponsors that give you money, and really any playable sponsors are good here, but sponsors that can give you money now and over the course of the entire game are going to be the best kind of sponsors that you can play. You also want to get your income as high as possible, and the main way of getting your income as high as possible is to get lots of appeal. So, of course, sponsors that will give you a shot in the arm of appeal are also great here. Also, don't sleep on the value in the first break of just building a kiosk or pavilion for $1, maybe $2 more of income. That can be really great. And sometimes sponsors can accomplish a lot of these goals without even playing an animal. Sponsors that are worth points are a big deal, but also cards like Side Entrance Engineer can be abused to get you lots of money from just building a ton of kiosks and pavilions or a ton of stuff near your side entrance. This can provide such a huge amount of income over the course of the game that it can be worth not playing an animal over the first break, because it outclasses the money you would get from just playing one animal before the break. Sometimes you can make more and then play two animals second break or something along those lines. Another thing you really want to do in the first break is to spend your worker. Don't ever put yourself in a situation where your opponent can cause a break and they've used their worker and you didn't. A competent opponent will pretty much always do this, and yes, this can lead to some dancing around your action order. I think one of the biggest signals that your opponent wants a fast break is that they take the hand size university. That can be a big flag that you want a quick break, but also, use this to your advantage. If your hand is not very good, just take hand size uni, take 5 coffees, and maybe draw a bunch of cards and see if you can find something better. An uncomfortably fast first break can make up for the fact that maybe your first break wasn't going to be all that great. You can just make it not that great for your opponent. Let's talk about which cards to keep through the break. Especially for the first break, you're going to be looking at a lot of cards, right? And you can only keep 3 of them through the first break. If that seems really awful, then you probably need to be taking the hand size university, but you're not going to get that every game. You need to know which cards you're going to keep. You need to have a plan to play the rest of the cards that you can, and then discard the ones that you can't. Then, once that plan has been done, you need to have a plan to proactively trigger the break after this if you want that to happen. Sometimes you feel like you can get a ton of value by playing a lot of cards you would otherwise discard, and that's great. You should aim for that and not proactively trigger the break. But if you don't, you should proactively do that. Don't play sponsors that are not going to meet your goals of making more money and getting some more points. You would rather just proactively trigger the break and move the game along. I would say that this is a consideration you should have from the first action of the game. Like the first time you see the row, you should be thinking about, all right, which cards am I going to keep over the break? And then figure out which cards you want to play. If you're going to be drawing from the deck, maybe you do it then, maybe you reevaluate then. But like, this is something that should be on the front of your mind every action in the first break. I also want to give a special mention to sunbathing and pouching. The first break is usually when you're going to discard more cards than any other break, and sunbathing and pouching are at their best because they give you points, which are income, and just directly money for cards you might otherwise discard. So these are especially good in the first break of the game. Let's talk about having a plan for getting your second worker. In the first break, you will usually just have one worker, and that is pretty limiting. The sooner you can get a second worker, the more free you are to take the association. The sooner you can get a second worker, the freer you are to take the association action whenever it suits you. I want to be pretty deliberate about the way I said that. What I did not say is once you have 2 workers, you need to be playing both of them every break. That is not what I said. I said that once you have 2 or more workers, you can pretty much take the association action whenever you want to, and do it when it makes sense. If you don't spend every worker every break, that's okay. But if your association is stuck on 5, and you don't have a worker, that feels bad. So getting your second worker definitely has some value. Also, playing sponsor cards when you don't have a second worker, it kind of feels bad. Because if you play a sponsor and then you play an association action, it's going to be hard to get your sponsors back up to 5 after that to proactively trigger a break. So these are definitely things you should think about. Sometimes it's okay to just have one worker, especially if you don't have any sponsor cards. Having one worker is just fine. You don't need any more because whenever you want to take association, it's there for you and you're taking 5 coffees. So all of this revolving around getting your second worker, that's sort of the value of what the second worker brings to you. How do we get it? I would say the most basic way of getting your second worker is by backing a conservation project in the second break and taking a worker from your map bonus space. That's the easiest to access. And so if you're going to do that, you should plan your entire first break around that. With that said, frequently you can do better, but that's something always that's available to you. Another thing that's usually available to you in some form is by getting an 8 reputation, and that's the line I talked about in a previous video. You take both the universities that give you reputation, you upgrade animals, so you're getting rep when you take that at strength 5, and you want to cover reputation spots on your map. Things that are extremely helpful here are sponsors and animals that give you reputation. Sponsors that give you rep are really, really good in the early game because they accelerate you getting your second worker. Usually that's the only support you need in order to get your second worker in the second break and even play it. Also, this can come up if you backed a breeding program conservation project in the second break and you don't want to take the map bonus worker, then you can just take 2 reputation, university on the next break, and you've upgraded animals at this point. You've covered a map bonus frequently. You'll get your second worker in the third break, which is also a totally reasonable line. Another big way to get your second worker is by choosing it at 2 conservation points. There's an entire video about this later in the series, so we'll address it there. And then finally, you can take your third partner zoo. I mean, that's the other place where your worker can come from. This is something I usually only do on outdoor areas, but sometimes I do it on like park restaurant, or if I'm like really concerned about getting habitat diversity 5. It's pretty narrow because you kind of have to upgrade association. You're not really getting any other upgrades during that time, but it can be a reasonable line of play, and it's something that you sometimes do. Also, maybe a card can get you a worker, and you'll have to do what the card says. Let's talk about what I like to call breaking the game. These are things that you can do in the first break that are really, really good, meaning that there are cards in the game that are sort of made to be balanced by the fact that you're not supposed to play them in the first break of the game. So the things that you're not supposed to have or not meant to be able to do in the first break are have upgraded cards, have your second worker, and back conservation projects. If you can do any of these things in the first break, that's great. So you should aim to do them. You should understand when those things are good and how they're good, and make sure you can actually get value out of them, given the support that you have to make that kind of thing happen. So let's talk about card upgrades in the first break. Aside from the 2 maps where you can get like a partner zoo or university from covering a placement bonus, and even then that's pretty difficult, you're usually looking at getting to 5 reputation to get an upgrade in the first break. Taking the university gives you 2 rep plus a rep placement bonus will get you most of the way there. That's 4 rep. You really only need another card that gives you reputation and you're there. Now, if you can get there before you take the animals action, then you could even get like a 6th rep from taking the animals at 5. And, that's really solid. You're most of the way to 8. You're in great shape. But I would say that's the most common way of getting a card upgrade in the first break, 5 reputation. Another one is by getting 2 conservation. Without backing a project, this usually requires the support of multiple cards from hand, so it's a little bit narrow, but if you do see it, if you have 2 playable cards that give you a conservation each in the first break, and then you get a card upgrade, great, go for it. And you can do a lot with these upgrades. What do you do with these upgrades? I would say the most common upgrades you'll take in the first break are build. You can build kiosks and pavilions and really give yourself extra income in the first break. That's a great thing to do with an upgraded action first break. Upgrading sponsors. That's a great thing first break. Either you have a sponsors card that requires it, and they're all fantastic first break, or you just take a bunch of coffees and get a ton of money. That is super solid, a great way to use your card upgrade. Upgrading animals. As I mentioned before, this is a great way to get to 8 reputation very quickly, often in the second break, and spend both of your workers. Very good thing to do with your card upgrade. Let's talk about backing a conservation project in the first break. Usually, if you're backing a project in the first break, it is an animal release. In general, bigger animals are better to release because you get a larger enclosure back and you get more points and stuff. But in the first break, you can definitely get a lot of value out of releasing a small animal, especially because you can just build a big enclosure for it, a big enough enclosure for whatever animal you want to play next. Stick the small animal in there, and that's your only enclosure, so you'll still get the big enclosure back when you back the release. When you back a release in the first break, you almost always want to take $5 income in this place, especially if you can't play another animal after releasing. Now, the $5 helps you with that. But there's a risk of being really poor through the next couple of breaks because you don't have much appeal. You gave it up to back the project and release your animal. So the $5 income really helps to mitigate this, and then it's just gravy for the rest of the game. And, you'll get a bonus for 2 CP as well. There's some other edge cases for like geological and aquatic projects. If you manage to get like 2 of the same species without using association action, that's solid. If you're on rescue station, these are other ways to get first break projects that are not releases. And in this case, the sky's the limit. You can take whatever map bonus you feel is appropriate. Obviously, the income ones are best. I mean, they're great when you back them early in the game because you can get a ton of stuff over the course of the game through them. Watch out for your opponent. Your opponent will have to do certain things most of the time to back a conservation project in the first break. Usually, you want to take your association action as one of like the first few actions in that break. And if they don't do that, they might be planning to back a project. So you at least want to make the break shorter so they can't get value out of that, for sure. But often just threatening to cause a break will sort of force your opponent to take their association action. If they were not ready to back a project yet, then they can't do it because otherwise you can cause the break. They haven't spent their worker. That feels really bad. So yeah, watch out if you think your opponent's going to be doing this. There is definitely counterplay, and competent opponents will do this counterplay against you. Let's talk about getting a second worker in the first break. Most common way to do this is by backing a conservation project in the first break. You'll either take it from your map bonus or take it on 2 CP. But there are some other ways to do it. Talented Communicator, New Zealand First Seal. These are cards that give you a worker. If you can manage to get them played in the first break, you're doing great. The Research Institute map plus the sponsor spokesperson can actually get you to 8 reputation in the first break, given enough time. You cover the reputation spot on your map. You take the university that gives you 2 reputation. That gets you to 5. You upgrade build. You find the other university spot using that. You take the 2 science university that gets you to 7 reputation. You upgrade animals, and then you play a small enough animal that you can get your 8th rep. It's kind of narrow, and a competent opponent will see this coming and cause a break before you have time to do it. But it's a line of play. You can at least threaten it. Maybe they didn't want to cause a break. So I keep saying a competent opponent will not let you get value out of this. And, you kind of want to try and mask your intentions. If they get greedy and play a sponsor and then all of a sudden, oh, I'm doing this great thing and I have time for it in the first break, that's a great situation to be in. But also be that competent opponent. If you smell something funny, trigger a break. Or threaten to trigger a break. Maybe that's not what you want to do, and of course there's value in threatening to do something amazing in the first break so that your opponent is forced to do it, but you could be on both sides of this situation. So be aware of it and know what the signs are if you want to make your second worker actually good, you should be able to play it. That seems a little bit obvious, but I would say taking the worker on 2 conservation points is a great way to make this happen, because you don't have to decide if you're getting a second worker until it's time to take it when you got 2 CP, and if the opponent just played a sponsor, or if they don't have the ability to trigger a break anytime soon, then yeah, go for the worker. And if not, maybe go for the upgrade. So that's one thing. Also, you can pass your card's action for an X. It's a pretty strong signal, but also the opponent needs to make 9 coffees to trigger the break, and that's just going to take a while. Also, a reason that you might pass an action for an X, particularly cards, is if you have a 6-cost sponsor. So if you can make it look like to your opponent that, oh, maybe I have a 6-cost sponsor to play, they may let their guard down a little bit. So definitely be paying attention to your opponent throughout the first break. There's so much that you need to dance around in order to make sure bad things don't happen to you, to make sure good things don't happen to them, or at least things that aren't too good, or at least that you're getting the better end of that exchange. And there's a lot to watch out for. There's a lot I've said in this video, and make sure you're paying attention every single turn of the game so that you can come out on top in this situation. That's all I have for this video, and thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.